Manchester, the northern capital that thrives for entertainment, is best known as the city that birthed numerous acts that swept the nation. However, there is one music scene that's become more popular in recent years, yet hidden to the mainstream eye. Dubbed the capital of the North, Manchester is known for its influence on the histories of industry and music, as well as its world-renowned sporting connections. Manchester is best known for its star-studded musical heritage, having birthed the likes of the Chemical Brothers, Joy Division, the Smiths, and even the Happy Mondays. As the Stone Roses frontman Ian Brown once said, Manchester's got everything except a beach. Manchester's music scene is still thriving today, not only for the acclaimed and emerging artists, but for its diverse range of music venues used by the up-and-coming and A-list alike. Back in the 80s and 90s, when the rise of metal bands began to establish themselves, the Manchester metal scene was very underdeveloped. The scene didn't really gain a cult following until the last decade. Now, as a thriving industry, it can be considered as one of the best metal scenes in the UK up to date, playing a wide variety of metal and alternative music. However, at the time, the music that seemed to get the most attention amongst fans was those within the slam metal subgenre. For those who don't know, slam metal is a subgenre of brutal death metal that focuses on slow or mid-tempo sections built on chromatic, palm-muted riffs, otherwise known as slams. Compared to brutal death metal's basic songwriting aesthetics, guitar solos are less important, though blast beats, breakdowns and tremolo riff sections are frequently applied. The genre has its origin in the 1990s New York death metal scene, which in turn brought in influences from the sound attitude and aesthetic of New York hardcore, where bands such as Suffocation pioneered the use of slam riffs. Devourment and Eternal Bleeding are often considered the first true slam bands, as they popularised many of the genre's songwriting conventions and visual aesthetics. Despite the genre starting within New York, it is popularised globally amongst the metal fanbase. This can be most notably seen within Manchester, or most notably credited as Slamchester.
It's a combination of two words, like slam being the metal genre, which was popular at the time, and then Manchester, where again, like, it was the most popular music at that time, and it started just becoming more and more popular among consumers and viewers and the performers themselves, until eventually it just gained more and more popularity, and that's how Slamchester was born.
Although slam was at its high in Manchester, the hype for the subgenre didn't last too long. Other genres became popular, such as hardcore and beatdown. However, people still use the term Slamchester.
It used to just cover the one subgenre that it was about, and then eventually over time it just became an umbrella term to all heavy genres in the north, really. So it just covered everything from hardcore to slam, what it was originally, and then to the new school of like beatdown and deathcore, and it's just become a buzzword and a term of endearment, really. From Mortal Shift, I'm the vocalist. We are a four-piece hardcore band from Manchester. Try and use elements of deathcore and beatdown as well, and old NYHC. Got into performing from just sort of being a fan of music, and then becoming a performer. You sort of watch the people that you're into, and I just wanted to do it myself. In both listening to music and performing it, there's just nothing that compares to it. It's just the best feeling in the world.
Despite these events being a regular occurrence, they're typically hosted at only a few local venues amongst Manchester.
There's only a few venues that cater to that kind of sound and style of what we play and what promoters tend to put on. Quite a few venues have been shut down and demolished for student accommodation, or they've just dried up. You know, like venues like Sound Control, Tiger Lounge, they've all been shut down and demolished. Retro Bar was closed for a really long period of time, but then it got reopened. Best thing about local venues is the intimacy about them and how communities form about around certain venues, and they're just the best places to put on local shows just because of how close and how intimate they are, and then just the friendships and families that grow from it.
If people were out like watching live music, they'd be listening to it or like recording it at home. Like more often than not, like the artist and the listener are like one and the same.
Being involved with music is a 24/7 lifestyle for these people. The most popular reason for this is people would use metal music as a means of mental therapy for themselves.
I think for me, the reason why I write and perform music the way I do is because it's a great way of letting out everything that I can't get out in a conventional sense.
From a listener's point of view, I can agree with them because, like, for example, I can understand where the artists are coming from emotionally. So it's sort of like I'm expressing myself like vicariously through the music, as if like they're speaking my emotions as well.
And because of that, the metal scene, there's just a lot of social and mental benefactors, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
to
it's
be
sort of
fair,
how
like-
it is, really, with how everyone interacts with each
Yeah,
other.
it's like a lot of mainstream audiences don't understand like there's more to it, like that sort of music than just like loud noises.
Exactly.
Like if you actually listen to like what they're saying, and you
Yeah,
can sort of feel it a lot more.
yeah. There's a hell of a lot more compassion going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Despite it being a thriving scene, the music is still often overlooked and pushed to the side compared to the mainstream music. This is usually due to the lack of production values and mainstream appeal. For instance, a lot of the gigs that are organised are at places such as Star and Garter, Retro Bar, the Pier Hat, and most famously Rebellion Bar. Despite frequently using these places to host events, they can be best described as small, gritty, and dark.
I think one of the difficulties about being in a band is that you don't get paid a hell of a lot, to the point where you can't really make a full-time living off of it unless you're a really mainstream artist. Eventually it can affect the quality of your work and like the drive to do it, because you don't really have a lot to show for it. All of those factors can just contribute to just the quality and the production, really, of the music.
Metal is often seen as a novelty genre by some mainstream audiences. This can be due to the use of hyper-violent themes in lyrics and imagery, or vocals which normally consist of extremely low-pitched, unintelligible death grunts, heavily distorted guitars, or fast-paced blast beats on the drums.
Like, there's correlation that like the heavier the music is, like the more niche or underground the fan base is. I mean, because mainstream audiences prefer like not as heavy stuff, more like simplistic and catchy like melodies or chord progressions, rather than just like themes about death and violence or blast beats, for example.
The metal scene in Manchester is intertwined with other creative art forms. For example, the thriving independent photography scene.
So the reason why photography is so important for the Manchester music scene is because it almost works as a sort of promotion and advertisement for the music scene itself. So it offers like a snapshot of what a show is, what the music is, what the band music sound like. So for instance, when I was working with Stu's band, I tried to incorporate how the music sounds and like the vibe of the shows. So for instance, because there's a lot of like aggression behind the music, they used a lot of like red tones, a lot of sort of shaky, blurry pictures to connote the high energy and the high movement. But in comparison to that sort of music, I've also worked with bands like Aria, which is more like alternative, sort of like on the indie side, as well as Cold Shoulders. Yeah, you get a variation of these sort of like genres in Manchester, and that's what makes the music scene so great. And the difference is, since I've moved away from Manchester and I moved to Shrewsbury, I've noticed that there isn't really a music scene in comparison to Manchester, because you've got in Manchester all these different genres and different bands always like, you know, coming up, whereas here it's just sort of like barren and it's hard to find work. But Manchester is great in terms of the music scene, in terms of like opportunities for photographers, and I hope more people get out there and make use of this opportunity.
For a minute, let's talk about art as a whole. We're not just talking about a small scene in the city in the UK anymore, but art in general now. There's so many different forms of art: music, painting, photography, the list goes on, and anyone and everyone can find their place in it. But it's time we recognise the contribution that art has had towards health and well-being. There was a 2017 case study where Arts and Minds, a leading arts and mental health charity, ran weekly workshops for people experiencing depression, stress or anxiety in Cambridgeshire for the past 9 years. An evaluation revealed a 71% decrease in feelings of anxiety and a 73% fall in depression. 76% of participants also said that their well-being increased, and a 69% felt more socially included. Gavin Clayton, Executive Director of the charity and one of the founders of the National Alliance for Arts, Health and Wellbeing, says that arts are important for well-being because beauty has a role in our lives. If we don't listen to that or pay attention, then that can cause problems. Despite its help towards mental health and self-expression, cuts and policy changes have taken its toll towards creative subjects within British schools alone, which will eventually be systematically removed from the UK education system. Another fatal blow to modern creative arts, more particularly music, is the rise of music venues closing down or being demolished. This has been in full effect recently, especially within Manchester. Morris's A Light That Never Goes Out refers to the North's unbreakable spirit, but it seems that the light is going out at many of our music venues. We've also seen a decline in music spaces that are typically cheap or free to hire, meaning that young bands risk being priced out of the music circuit. According to the Music Venue Trust, 40% of small-scale venues have disappeared in the past decade. It's proving harder than ever in modern-day society to maintain the creative spirit of upcoming artists. But preserving Manchester's colourful venues seems possible, but it won't be easy. It requires venues and bands to adapt for the times while maintaining their individuality, and, most importantly, for loyal fans to go start attending gigs regularly once again.
So the best way to support the scene is by coming down to shows, keeping the venues open, but by also sharing the work photographers like me do at the shows on social media, because that also helps the growth of new and upcoming artists and gets them more attention and traction.
Right, what people can do to to support the scene is just come to shows. You know, if you have the money, buy a shirt, buy the EPs or the albums that they put out, or, you know, if you're skint like most of the musicians actually are, then you can just, you know, like pages on Facebook or share posts, get the word about. That's the way these things grow. It's the way, you know, I got to where I am. I'm not exactly massive.
Yeah, best way to support the scenes, like come to shows, like buy merch, support the bands. If you can't afford to come to shows, which is not unusual, social media is like power at the minute. You can like the band pages, check out their Spotify or YouTube or videos they post online, or like just spread the word really, because it helps the bands, it helps the scene, it helps the venues.
Cypher, God Complex, Pivo Rapist, Snuffed, Mortal Shift, Lotus Eater, Street Soldier, Capital Punishment, Chainsaw Castration, Visions of Disfigurement, Broken Teeth, Loathe, Annotations of an Autopsy, Gassed Up, Guilt Trip, Leached, Osaya, Clawhammer, plus many, many more.